This lesson is how to rotate in the coordinate plane. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we have to make sure that we understand is directions and making sure that we're rotating our shape the correct number of degrees, clockwise and counterclockwise. So to go ahead and get started, we're going to go ahead and start with counterclockwise 90-degree rules. So to start this, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we understand counterclockwise is the opposite of a clock. So it goes this direction. The rule for counterclockwise 90 is negative y, comma, x, meaning x and y flip location and y changes sign. 180-degree counterclockwise is negative x, comma, negative y, meaning x and y stay where they are, but they change sign. And lastly, we have 270 degrees counterclockwise, and that rule is y, comma, negative x, meaning x and y flip location and x changes sign. For clockwise rotation, clockwise is in the direction of a clock. And with this rule, we're going to go ahead and review how to do the 90, 180, 270 rule. So the clockwise 90-degree rule is y, comma, negative x, meaning x and y flip location, x changes sign. The 180-degree rule is negative x, comma, negative y, which is where x and y just simply change sign. And the clockwise 270 rule is negative y, comma, x, meaning x and y flip location and y changes sign. Now, looking at this problem, we should notice some similarities here. The counterclockwise 90 is the same as clockwise 270. The 180-degree rule for counterclockwise is the same as clockwise. And lastly, we have our 270-degree counterclockwise rule, and that's the same as 90 degrees clockwise. What that means is we can actually combine these charts together and use them to help memorize all 6 rules in just 3 simple steps. So let's do a combined chart. The way that you're going to start this is you're going to change it to counterclockwise and draw your little circle. Then we're going to start by labeling it down 90, 180, 270. To help you remember the chart, we're going to go ahead and build it from here. YX, XY, YX. Then we're going to go ahead and worry about which one should be negative. Now the trick here is that the 90 is listed first, so we're going to make the first one negative. The 270 is listed last, so we're going to make the last one negative. And the 180 is in the middle, so that means we're going to make both of them negative. So that takes care of the counterclockwise chart. Now we're going to build it backwards and help us with clockwise. So I'm going to put a CW and draw my clockwise arrows. And now I'm going to build it backwards. 90, 180, 270. So the way that this chart's going to help you is if you just need counterclockwise, you just cover up the clockwise rules. So let's say I want to know counterclockwise 270. I'm going to cover up clockwise, find 270, and my rule is y, comma, negative x. If I want clockwise 180, I'm going to cover up counterclockwise, and my rule for clockwise 180 is negative y, or negative x, negative y. So that's kind of the combined chart to just help you remember how to set up your problem and how to remember the chart in an easier way. If you have a rotation that's larger than 360, all you're going to do is simplify that number by subtracting 360 until you get 90, 180, or 270. So let's go ahead and start at 540. To figure out the rule, I'm going to do 540 minus 360. And 540 minus 360 gives us an answer of 180. So that means we're going to use the 180-degree rule, clockwise. Let's try 450. So if we start at 450 minus 360, 450 minus 360 is 90. So we're going to use the 90 degrees counterclockwise rule. So any number over 360, you just keep subtracting. So let's say we had 900. When I subtract 360 from 900, I end up with 540. which is still bigger than 360. So what that means is I'm going to have to subtract 360 again. I want to simplify this as much as I can because I need it to be either 90, 180, or 270. So if I subtract 360 again, I narrow it down to 180. So if the number does not simplify immediately, just keep subtracting 360 until you get either 90, 180, or 270. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice some of this. So the first thing is we want to rotate 180 counterclockwise. So the counterclockwise 180 rule is negative x, comma, negative y. So what that means is all of my x values are going to stay the opposite. So 3 becomes negative 3, my y becomes positive 1. B prime, the opposite of 1 is negative 1, and the opposite of negative 2 is 2. So now we're going to graph it. So negative 3, 1, 2, 3, up 1. That's A prime. B prime is negative 1, up 2. And I'm going to connect it. Now, it does look a little bit weird, so if you are interested in using tracing paper, you are more than welcome to do that. All you have to make sure that you do is you trace the origin, making a little tiny plus sign. You want to line it up, and then I'm going to trace my shape, which in this case is a segment, and counterclockwise means I'm going opposite of a clock. So if I'm rotating it 180 counterclockwise, that's 2 turns to the left. 1 turn is 90, and 1 more would be 180. So notice how that shape turns, and it ends up in the same location as our graph. So just remember, if you're wanting to use tracing paper, that you trace the intersection of the axes, the origin. So when you rotate it, you can line it back up again. All right, let's try another one. Let's practice a rotation 270 degrees clockwise. So clockwise, remember, is this direction. 270, our rule is negative y, comma, x. This one is a little bit harder because we're going to have to flip x and y's location and change y's sign. Remember, the negative doesn't mean make it negative, it means change the sign. So A prime, and I don't know if I have a lot of space here, let's go. A prime, I'm going to move the negative 1 to the front and change it, and I'm going to move my x value of negative 3 to the end and keep it negative. B prime, I'm going to move my negative 1 to the front and change, move my x to the end and keep it the same. Let's go ahead and graph. So 1, negative 3, 1, 1, 2, 3. That's A prime. And then 1, negative 1 is B prime. Connecting. So let's go ahead and do it with our tracing paper. So again, if I'm going to do this with my tracing paper, I need to trace the intersection of the origin right here. I'm going to trace my segment. And you can also label A and B. This will help you pay attention to where A prime and B prime should end up. So clockwise, remember, is this direction. And if I'm rotating 270, that would be 3 turns to the right. So let's count. 1, 2, and 3, right where we graphed it. So the most important part, remember, if you're graphing a rotation, is to graph this little plus sign where it intersects. So when you turn it, you always line it up the right way. And let's do our very last problem. Now this is as hard as these problems get. This incorporates rotations, reflections, and translations. So you're actually going to be making a pretty decently sized T-chart because you're going to end up doing a couple things to this. We are going to end up with triple prime on here because we're doing 3 different transformations. So the first thing we're going to do is the same as always. We're going to list our x and y points first. So my A value is 1, 1. Remember, x direction first, then y. This, writing it up here, is going to help you remember x direction is always first when plotting points. Point B is at 1, 2, 3, up, 1, 2, 3, so 3, 3. Now, you have to do what it tells you to do first. And I know that that seems weird and weird to say because it's kind of common sense. But we tend to forget that we have to do what it tells us first, and if we don't, it's going to end up in the wrong spot. So the first thing it tells us to do is reflect y equals negative x. So we're going to write that rule here. Now the reflection rule for y equals negative x is negative y comma negative x. What that means is x and y flip location and they both change sign. So a prime becomes negative 1, negative 1. And b prime becomes negative 3, negative 3. And I know it doesn't look like we flipped anything because the numbers are identical, but we really did. It's just you can't tell because the numbers are the same. All right, the next thing it tells us to do is to rotate clockwise 90 degrees. And we want to rotate clockwise 90 degrees. So I'm going to write down my rule. So clockwise 90 is y comma negative x. Now remember, this is called an extended t-chart. So I don't care about what we did here. This is now just x and this is now just y. So we're going to treat them as such. So my a double prime becomes negative 1 comma 1. And my b double prime becomes negative 3, 3. The last thing that it says is to translate 3, negative 5. Now 3, negative 5, that's written in what's called component form, and we want to change that to point notation. To change that to point, the 3 is positive, so that means we're going to have x plus 3. The y is negative, so that becomes y minus 5. We're now working with triple prime, so we put 3 little tick marks. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2. 1 minus 5 is negative 4. B triple prime, negative 3 plus 3 is 0. And 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Now that we've done every single thing that it's asked, now we can graph it. So I'm going to go over to my graph, and I'm going to go 2, down 4, and that becomes a triple prime. 0, negative 2 becomes B triple prime, and I'm going to connect, and that's your final answer. Remember, if this segment got bigger or smaller or the shape is changed in any way, one of the points is off and it's not correct. So just be mindful that these segments should stay congruent when you're graphing.